They called him a fool, a man who threw away fortune for love. Once the heir to a powerful company, James walked out with nothing but a promise to protect Diep and Little Nee. Now, he's fighting to survive on barren land, haunted by the echoes of the world he left behind. But sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find yourself again. Don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds. The late afternoon sun slants through the dusty haze of the Hero lumberyard, painting everything in dull amber. The buzzsaw screams in the distance, a sound James once found comforting, now grating like a memory he can't silence. This yard used to be his kingdom. Every cut, every plank, every worker's shout, it all used to move to his rhythm. Now, he's just another man in a sweat-stained shirt, hammer in hand, trying to finish his shift before the light fades. A voice slices through the saw's hum. "Heard you used to run this place?" James turns. A stranger stands there, shirt wrinkled, smirk sharp enough to cut wood. His tone carries both curiosity and cruelty. "Yeah," James says evenly, gripping the hammer's handle a little tighter. "I managed it for a while." The man laughs, a hollow, echoing sound that bounces off the stacked pine boards. "Managed it, huh? Heard the company bled money. They had to let you go, right? Studied abroad, came back, Daddy handed you companies on a silver plate. And what did you do? Refused to work, ran off chasing some girl. Now look at you. Fired. Broke." Each word is a blade, slicing through what little pride James still has left. He stands there, jaw tightening, eyes cold as forged steel. "That's family business," he says finally, voice low but steady. Inside, his pulse pounds unevenly. The stranger keeps talking, voice dripping with mock pity. "Keep playing it cool, man. One day, you'll be selling that fancy car of yours just to buy gas." James doesn't answer. He just turns, shoulders stiff, and walks away. His boots scrape against the concrete floor. His shadow stretches long and thin beneath the dying sun. Outside, the wind rises, stirring sawdust into tiny storms. The air smells of pine resin and something older. Rot, regret, the slow decay of dreams. James pauses beside his car. The paint is chipped, the door handle hot from the sun. His hand trembles slightly as he touches the key. For a moment, he just stands there, staring at the steering wheel. Then, from somewhere deep inside, a different image flickers. Diep's smile under the potato field's soft light. Little Nee tugging his sleeve, giggling. "Uncle James, come play." The memory softens him. Yes, he lost everything people called success. Yes, he traded suits and offices for sweat and soil. But that laughter, those moments, they're the only thing that still feels real. He takes a slow breath, starts the engine. The saw's noise fades behind him as he drives out. But the sound of failure, the kind that lingers in your bones, stays. Noon burns fiercely above the potato fields. The earth cracks beneath James's boots, dry and stubborn as an old scar. His straw hat shields half his face, but sweat still rolls down his neck. He gazes across the barren rows. Once green, now nothing but brittle stalks. "If I'd just listened to Dad," he mutters, "the lumberyard would still be mine." The thought drags him backward in time, into air-conditioned offices, polished floors, the smell of new wood and coffee, staff bowing, investors smiling, his father nodding with pride. He had everything once. And then came Diep, her laughter in the fields, her hands dirty with soil, yet gentle when she held his, and Nee, calling him Uncle James, eyes full of innocence. He closes his eyes, whispering to himself, "Between love and career, I chose love." The wind blows harder, kicking dust around his boots. His voice cracks, rough with everything he's swallowed for months. He remembers the mockery back at Hero, the look on his father's face, half pity, half disappointment. The world that once stood at his feet now looks at him with disdain. But here, this patch of scorched land, this creaking wooden house, this little family, this is the one place he still needed. He kneels, digs his hands into the dirt, scooping up a handful of soil. It's dry and lifeless, but he opens his palm and lets the wind take it anyway. Someday, maybe, they'll make this ground fertile again. "Uncle James?" A small voice breaks the silence. He looks up. Nee is running toward him, her tiny figure cutting through the glare. Behind her, Diep waves from the porch, apron fluttering in the wind. James rises slowly, dusts his knees. The sight of them pulls a smile from his lips, tired but real. He starts walking toward them. The sun burns his back, stretching his shadow long across the field. A bridge between the man he used to be and the man he's becoming. Nee reaches him first, laughing breathlessly. "Lunchtime. Auntie said hurry before it gets cold." He lifts her into his arms, heart lighter than it's been in months. As they walk toward the porch, the world around him feels alive again. Maybe the land isn't dead. Maybe it's just waiting, like him, for a little love and patience to bloom. The doubts that used to cling to his chest begin to fade with every step. For the first time, he stops questioning his choices. Because under this endless blue sky, surrounded by laughter and sunlight, James realizes he doesn't need to be the man who lost everything. He's the man who found what truly matters. The scent of pine still lingers in the air at the Hero lumberyard, sharp, raw, and oddly nostalgic. James walks through the yard once more, boots crunching against scattered sawdust. The machines roar as usual, workers shout orders, trucks come and go. But to him, everything feels distant, like he's walking through a memory he no longer belongs to. Then he hears that voice again. "Back already? What, failed again in your little potato paradise?" It's the same man, the one with the smirk. He's leaning against a stack of lumber, cigarette dangling from his mouth, eyes gleaming with mockery. James pauses, but doesn't turn around. "Not failed," he says calmly. "Just came to pick up a delivery." The man laughs, loud and crude. "Come on, man. Don't play hero. Word around here says your company lost money. Studied abroad, right? You had everything handed to you. Big office, big car, big future. And now you're what? A farmer?" James finally faces him. His hands are in his pockets, his expression calm, almost detached. "Old story," he says softly. "You really like repeating it, don't you?" The man sneers, smoke curling from his lips. "Old man gave you companies. You ditched them for some woman, got fired, and now you're here pretending to be humble. You really think love pays the bills?" James's eyes meet his, steady, unreadable. "Maybe not," he replies, "but it feeds the soul. Try it sometime." The man opens his mouth to fire back, but James has already turned. He walks toward the gate, unhurried, the sound of his footsteps blending with the saws. Outside, the world glows with late sunlight. His old car waits, paint faded, windshield smudged with dust. But his hands don't shake anymore when he grabs the keys. Because last night, he remembers, Nee had insisted he take the biggest piece of meat at dinner. Because Diep had laughed, teasing him about the new seeds they'd plant next week. Because that little wooden house, though poor, is filled with warmth no penthouse could match. He starts the engine. The saw's scream fades behind him, not as a reminder of loss, but as the sound of something he's finally learned to leave behind. The road stretches long ahead. Wind rushes through the window, tugging at his shirt, carrying the scent of open fields. No longer Mr. James, CEO. No longer the son of the hero family. Just James, Diep's partner, Nee's father figure, a man starting again from zero. Later that evening, golden dusk settles over their small home. The fields shimmer with dying light, and the faint sound of Nee's laughter drifts through the air. James parks beside the gate, watching for a moment before stepping out. Diep looks up from the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're home early," she smiles. He nods. "Finished what I needed to do." Nee runs to him, holding up a small, misshapen flower crown. "For you, Uncle James. I made it myself." He crouches, accepts it with a grin that lights his whole face. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Diep joins them, her eyes soft. "You didn't have to go back there, did you?" James glances at the fading road, then back at her. "I had to. Not for them. For me." She tilts her head, curious. "To realize," he continues quietly, "that I'm finally free. That I'm done chasing approval. Done trying to prove I'm someone worth respecting. I already have everything I need here." The wind stirs again, carrying the smell of soil and fresh leaves. The horizon glows in hues of pink and orange. Diep steps closer, her hand slipping into his. "Then let's make this place thrive," she whispers. He smiles, squeezing her hand. Together. Weeks pass. The once barren field begins to show green. Rows of tiny sprouts stretch under the morning sun, fragile yet full of promise. James works silently beside Diep, planting, watering, fixing fences. Nee runs around chasing butterflies, her laughter echoing across the land. Each day brings new exhaustion, new sweat, new back pain, but also new peace. Sometimes, as James straightens to rest his aching shoulders, he catches himself smiling. He's never worked harder in his life, yet never felt lighter. In the distance, the Hero lumberyard still hums, but it no longer feels like a wound. It's just another place, another chapter he's already closed. One afternoon, while he's loading baskets of potatoes onto a truck, Diep brings him a bottle of water. "You know," she says teasingly, "you look happier dirty than you ever did in a suit." He laughs, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Guess I finally found the right uniform." They share a quiet moment, the kind that doesn't need words. Then Nee shouts from afar, waving wildly, "Look, the flowers bloomed." James and Diep turn, and there it is. A row of bright blossoms, yellow and white, swaying gently in the breeze. For a long time, James just stands there, staring. Something warm floods his chest, because he knows. This is it, the moment all his choices were leading toward. The lumberyard, the arguments, the humiliation, the exile, all of it brought him here. To this life, to these two souls, to this field that now blooms not just with flowers, but with redemption. As the sun dips low, he lifts Nee into his arms. Diep leans against his shoulder. And for the first time, the word failure means nothing. Under the glowing sunset, James smiles, truly smiles, because he finally understands. Losing everything was the only way to find what he was truly meant to build. A home, a family, a new beginning. Once a respected manager at his family's lumber company, James lost everything after walking away from power to follow his heart. Mocked by former colleagues and abandoned by those who once praised him, he now lives humbly beside Diep and little Nye, struggling to turn barren land into hope. Through humiliation, hard work, and love, James learns that success isn't measured by wealth, but by the warmth of those who stand beside you when the world turns cold. When he finally returns to the lumberyard, not to prove himself, but to let go, he realizes losing everything was his greatest freedom. Under the blazing sunset, with Diep's smile and Nie's laughter, James finds his true victory. A home built not from wood or money, but from love.